Purcell is named after a 2006 Supreme Court case where the justices laid out some guidance that seems reasonable on its face, which is that courts should be careful about changing the rules around elections too close to the election if that could cause confusion for voters. The problem, though, is that the way the court has been applying that guidance recently has created a get-out-of-jail-free card for states and localities that are engaging in voter discrimination, and it's put voters who are looking to protect their rights into a double bind. If you sue too early, right after a bad rule takes effect, then the court will say it's really difficult to show that anyone is experiencing harm from that rule yet. So, for example, are voters yet being turned away from the polls? But if you wait until you can document harm after harm and plenty of voters have been turned away or had their voices reduced by this new rule, then the court points to Purcell and says, well, it's too close to the election, and so it would be confusing to voters to change the rules. Around 2020, the elections, especially the primaries, were happening right as COVID was exploding. And so voters were facing risks at the polls, rules that might have made sense before but were really restrictive in light of the health concerns. And so there were a set of lower court rulings that required jurisdictions to update their elections rules to make them safe for folks to vote during COVID. And several times the Supreme Court came in and blocked those rules and pointed to Purcell. One example was in Wisconsin in April, right as COVID was really exploding. The lower court required the state of Wisconsin to give voters who were sending in absentee ballots a little bit more time for those ballots to arrive because there were problems with the mail, there was a surge of folks who were requesting those ballots. And the Supreme Court came in and said no, that giving folks extra time to return their ballots might cause confusion. So you can see how this general guidance can be applied in ways that actually makes no sense and harms voters just trying to exercise their fundamental rights. Purcell has once again become a big issue in the 2022 election cycle, especially as we consider how the new maps that states have drawn across the country affect voters of color. Every 10 years, we count the population through the US Census. And because of the one person, one vote rule, every jurisdiction in the country, from states that have congressional districts down to school boards, has to reshuffle their district lines to make sure there's about equal population in each voting district. That's known as the redistricting process. And the redistricting process historically has been a place where states and other localities have drawn maps that can reduce the power and voice of Black and brown voting populations. Oftentimes, Black voters have to sue to vindicate their rights to make sure that they have one person, one vote equal representation across the state. This has happened in this districting cycle, and already the Supreme Court has invoked Purcell and blocked Black and brown voters from the courthouse door. The good news is that Purcell is not a hard constitutional rule, it's just judge-made guidance, and so Congress has the power to fix this at any time. The Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act would fix the Purcell problem by simply stating that just because we're close to an election, that doesn't mean it should be an immovable obstacle to protecting Black and brown voters from discriminatory rules. In the Civil Rights era, the Supreme Court stepped up along with Congress to protect the right to vote for Black Americans and other people of color. Right now, the Supreme Court has shown that it will support barriers to the ballot instead of tearing them down. That's why Congress needs to step in to act now and pass the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act. We're in a critical election year and we can't afford to wait.